The views expressed, opinions given, and any communication made between the hosts and guests of What Are You Afraid of Horror and Paranormal Show do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of Para-X Radio, EMC Network, or all services that play this show. The hosts and services are not responsible for the actions of their guests, and the original rights of all intellectual property is retained by the creator, and all work is used with either permission or Creative Commons license. The show is for entertainment purposes only. I'm horror author T. Fox Dunham.
And I'm horror author and filmmaker Phil Thomas.
And tonight we're asking you,
what are you afraid of? Philadelphia's horror home with hosts T. Fox Dunham and Phil Thomas.
Episode 143, Scott Kenemore is bringing the zombies. We are back on What Are You Afraid of Horror and Paranormal Show, moving into, well, we're heading into summer. It's very warm out there. How are you, Phil?
Oh, I'm great. I'm pretty warm, actually, right now, sweating a bit because there's no air conditioning on at the moment, but other than that, pretty good.
Yeah, we're in that middle gray area where you can't put the AC on yet, but it's hot some days. It's about 81 here. What's it like in Lansdale?
I'd say about 82, maybe. 80. Well, my phone says that it's 80 degrees. Okay.
Indeed.
But it's going up to about 83 today, so.
Right.
I don't think there's really much of a difference in where we are. I think you might be a little cooler, but for whatever reason, my phone's saying it's cooler than where you are. I don't know.
Well, for our fans listening in the future, we recorded this on May 15th, and this is the day that a number of counties and states are beginning to move into the yellow or red zone, and so hopefully this whole viral issue is beginning to thaw a little bit. I guess we'll wait and see. We are What Are You Afraid of Horror and Paranormal Shows. This is episode 143. Scott Kenemore is bringing the zombies, because we're in an epidemic here. We're in an end-of-the-world situation here. Well, dramatically speaking, but no one has brought the zombies, and a lot of horror authors are saying, we're here. In fact, I saw a great post on Facebook. Okay, you're waiting for the zombies. Wait until the murder hornets start stinging the corona victims, and we'll see what happens.
Oh, maybe it's a cure.
Or the zombies will come from the interaction.
That could be it too.
But this is What Are You Afraid of Horror and Paranormal Show on Parax Radio Friday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern Time, and find us at our website at www.whatareyoufraidofpodcast.com, where you can find all previous 142 episodes plus our archive of ghost stories, interviews, connections to guests, and a page for every episode up to this point. Now, we've got a great guest on the show. We're bringing in some authors this summer, doing some paranormal stuff, but a lot of horror authors are coming in, probably because they're looking for promotional opportunities with all the conventions that have shut down. In fact, that's something we'll talk about. Well, Scott's a great guest, and I'm really looking forward to speaking to him. New York-born Scott Kenemore is a talented American writer and novelist. He was educated at Kenyon College and Columbia University, and he spent his 20s and 30s working in community development on the south side of Chicago, specifically for nonprofit entities that fought redlining and advocated for fair housing policies in some of the city's most segregated neighborhoods. He's the author of such books as Zombie Indiana, Zombie Illinois, and, you guessed it, Zombie Ohio. He's also produced a series of animated zombie guidebooks. I'm sure you've seen them in Barnes & Nobles. His essays and opinion pieces have appeared in Slate, Paranormal Pop Culture, and the New York Times Local East Village. He has discussed horror writing and zombies on Fox News and National Public Radio, and he's been featured in Rue Morgue magazine and Fangoria. Scott's also been a featured panelist at horror and sci-fi conventions like San Diego Comic-Con, Spooky Empire, and ZombieCon. He's a fellow member of the Horror Writers Association, and his new novel, Lake of Darkness, is now available. You can find his website at scottkenemore.com and follow him on Twitter at Scott Kenemore. Scott, welcome to the show.
Hello, it's nice to be. Can I talk now? This is okay?
No, it's fine.
I've done it wrong already.
Yeah, that's okay. That's pretty much how we do the show at this point.
Well, I thank you guys for having me on, and I think you cited correctly in your intro that right now we need you more than you need us. The promotional opportunities for writers with books coming out have just been sort of destroyed by COVID. So I'm so happy to be able to talk to you guys.
Yes, we have you right where we want you. Anyway, okay, so checking out your work, and it's funny because I've been seeing your work in places like Barnes & Noble for years, usually on the little stand by the cafe when I'm going into work, and I see Bill there, and Bill's always there. Well, I mean, I think Barnes & Noble's closed, and he's banging on the window right now. Let me in.
I don't think he's banging on the window. I think he's actually inside.
He's actually inside. Bill's a friend of ours, Scott, and I'm sure he's seen your work there too. Like the zombie survival guides and stuff, you'll see them on the table, especially at Halloween. And it's just really cool to meet the person behind them, especially when they're set up with books like Max Brooks and George Romero. And, we have a lot of zombie guests coming on this summer, actually. Okay, Scott, how did your professional writing career begin? What did you do to start getting published?
What did I do? This is like I have to account for myself. All the things I've done, not always savory. No, so I've always liked creative writing, and I always liked horror. I always say like the sort of eureka moment for me was like discovering like H.P. Lovecraft as a kid. I liked scary stories before him, but I really just, when I read his work, felt like this is the greatest thing that anyone has ever done ever. And I know I'm a dumb 10-year-old kid and I don't know much about the world, but I feel like this is the best thing anyone ever did, ever. And as a grown-up, I have largely continued to feel that way. But I like creative writing. I went to a college with a good creative writing program, Kenyon College. I got an MFA in creative writing in New York City. I went through a period, my most of my 20s, I published stories in magazines and short stories. But I didn't get a novel published, and I wrote several novels, and I would come very close and have meetings with editors, but it wouldn't quite happen. And then a friend of mine had suggested that, I like zombies so much, and I'm also very funny. Would you want to do a thing with zombies and humor? And so that sort of grew the like zombie self-help books that I did, starting with The Zen of Zombie. I continued after that to do more narrative things and creative things, and that sort of bloomed into Zombie Ohio, which is probably the novel I'm best known for. And I think it's clear I love zombies. I'm confident in my zombie bona fides. I've been on so many panels about zombies, written multiple books about zombies, but I also just like regular uncanny horror also. So sometimes I branch out. And there's some references to zombies and some very zombish things in my new novel, Lake of Darkness. But it's not specifically a zombie novel. It's sort of more cosmic horror and uncanny.
That sounds wonderful.
Well, I think so, but I wrote it, so.
We all think our own stuff is wonderful, but I honestly, I've read a couple of your things and they are wonderful.
Oh, well, God, thanks.
But what do you remember specifically? What began your love affair with zombies? Is there a specific moment?
Yeah, so I like zombies because they're scary, and I also think they're funny, and I also think they're sort of like relatable. And like of the monsters in the monster pantheon, you got like the Wolfman and vampires and ghosts, and I feel like the zombies are just sort of like the least serious, and they aren't concerned with how they look. Like vampires are very like fashionable and let me put on tailored clothing and come to my castle and we'll have red wine. And zombies are just sort of like, I'm up out of the ground and I'm going to eat your brain, and like we're not fancy. We're just like very casual kind of horror.
Right.
So maybe because I'm a casual kind of guy, I related to that, and I like to dramatize things in that I'm a fiction writer, but I'm not like a drama-filled person. So they zombies seem like a sort of like low drama kind of monster that I just felt like I clicked with, I guess.
Wonderful. Yeah, it's an interesting twist that you mentioned, how, and I actually never thought of it like that, how they have a comical appeal to them. I never thought of it like that. Because ghosts, ghosts aren't funny,
Well, unless it was like the ghost of Groucho Marx, and then I think
well, there you go. That is one good point.
Humor and horror have always come together. What did James Whale always said? That Frankenstein was greatly misunderstood, that it was actually a comedy. And if you watch it, it is very much a comedy. And I love the combination of genres like that, because horror, science fiction, fantasy like that, they often need that second element. Like horror sci-fi or comedy fantasy or comedy drama, that brings us sort of back into the literary field. So Scott, we were talking earlier about all the conventions are shut down. Everything. In fact, they're looking at shutting down the conventions next year. And we've been talking to other authors, like we were talking to Greg Bear on our previous episodes earlier in the spring, and he's one of the founders of San Diego Comic-Con. And what I was reading too was that a lot of times they can't return money, and we lost our deposit for Phenomenon pretty much at this point. I don't think it's coming back, because if they return the money, then they won't be able to continue. These conventions sort of survive year to year, and we may be looking at the death of many of them now because they didn't leapfrog this year. So how has the mass cancellation of the convention circuit affected your promotional plans? And what are you doing to adjust? Can you give other authors some advice on how to adapt to this?
I'll do my best. I feel like we're all sort of making it up as we go along. But yeah, like virtually every in-person appearance I was going to do has been pushed or canceled. I usually sign books every summer at Printers Row Literary Fest in Chicago, and I know that's been moved at least until September, but also that is outdoors. So it's sort of less of an enclosed space. In terms of tip, sort of a virtual reading launch where I'm going to be interviewed by Brendan Riley, who's a Columbia College Chicago professor who's an expert on horror, and sort of trying to make an event out of that. But my focus has been also on trying to protect brick and mortar bookstores. So I'm doing this with a brick and mortar bookstore, sort of that's not too far from my house, the bookstall. In the city where I live, Evanston, Illinois, there are, I guess 3 months ago, there were 5 bookstores, and now there are 3 because one shut down right as COVID was beginning, and the Barnes & Noble in downtown Evanston just put up a sign that said, like, yeah, when this is over, we're not reopening.
Oh, my word.
Yes. I'm one of those folks who genuinely thinks browsing in bookstores is a great and important experience. So I'm trying to use whatever attention capital I have by being a writer with a book launching to sort of encourage folks to think about saving physical bookstores if they can do that.
I couldn't agree with you more. And we've already lost the video stores, being able to walk in and browse around, look at the movies on the shelf. And I hope that doesn't happen with the bookstores, because I think we need that experience.
That's how I saw Scott's books to begin with.
Right, exactly.
In the bookstore. We don't browse Amazon like you would in a bookstore with a cup of coffee. I think we're going to hold on to the experience, though. It just might have to change a little bit. Amazon's going to own the world. When this is all done, AMC, Barnes & Noble, it's going to be an Amazon world. It's going to be Amazon Earth. And you know what? I'm kind of okay with that at this point. I know you do a lot of conventions. I know you've done conventions with Max Brooks, and that must have been a great deal of fun. And I've always wanted to meet the guy. I'm glad I haven't, though, because it would be very hard for me not to get him to quote History of the World stuff or Mel Brooks stuff to see if he sounds like his dad. Does he sound like his dad at all?
He's very, very nice. He doesn't. I've not met Mel Brooks, but I've seen interviews with him, and he seems like a pretty shticky guy, like always making jokes. And Max will bust your balls for sure, but in like a very like subtle way. Like there on YouTube, there are clips of like us on panels at Comic-Con where he's done things like switch his name tag with my name tag and then pretend to be me for a second just to mess with me. So he has a great sense of humor, but it's less pun oriented than Mel Brooks from what I've seen. But Max is a very, very nice man who has done great things for just the visibility of people who like to read zombie books and zombie genre generally, and is just a really opening and welcoming and a great guy. So,
correct me if I'm wrong, Scott, but there was an interview, not an interview, but there was a commercial actually with Mel Brooks and his son, and they were standing between a pane of glass. Was that his son, or is that?
Yeah, so that's Mel Brooks and Max Brooks, his son, and that was their COVID stay inside PSA they did. I believe you're referencing.
Yes, it was.
Cool.
Yes, correct. That was him.
Yeah.
Oh, nice. Okay, great. I didn't know if he had more than one son or not. So.
Knowing Mel, he probably did. Your new book, Lake of Darkness, came out on May 5th. We're very happy to have you on the show. I know we've been working on it for a while. The show, I have to book guests months in advance. I do, because we get a lot of requests. You fit right in, especially because we love to go back to zombies. Zombies are one of our favorite things. In fact, my first real novella was a zombie novella that was also about and it's something I'm experiencing now. I'm a cancer survivor. You know, I've not been doing great physically lately, but I'm always living with lymphoma on my shoulders. And I've always lived with death. I'm always looking for bumps in my body. All these years later, I'm still looking for it. Every once in a while, something comes back, and they have to cut a piece of me off and ship it to some lab. But so I'm looking at the world right now, and everybody's like watching for death in the shadows and in the corners and behind you in queue. And I'm like, you amateurs, really? Come on. This is what it felt like for me for years, and that's what my zombie novella was about. That feeling was about a cancer survivor who suddenly found the rest of the world catching up to him. And I put that in a collection of 4 novellas with Jay Wilbur, and I want to see if that's there. But your book sounds incredible. I've been reading it. Wonderful use of language. During the First World War, on the south side of Chicago, Officer Joe Flippity has begun an investigation into a serial decapitationist who is hunting young children. At a time when African American officers are rendered second class by prejudicial policies, Flip is nonetheless called upon by the mayor of the city, the legendary Big Bill Thompson himself, and a host of powerful city fathers to thwart this murderer who threatens to destroy the city's reputation as a safe haven for those making the great migration north. A combination of detective thriller, cosmic horror, and historical fiction, Lake of Darkness takes us to the deepest and darkest places in Chicago's very dark history. We have an excerpt, which our wonderful English folk singer David Walton narrated for us. It's from chapter 10 of your book, and we're going to play that now on episode 143. Scott Kenemore is Bringing the Zombies on What Are You Afraid Of? Horror and Paranormal Show. We're on Parax Radio Friday nights at 9 p.m. Check out our website at www.whatayouafraidofpodcast.com, and you can find us at pretty much every major podcast service download. We're going to pause now to play the excerpt from Lake of Darkness on episode 143.
What are you afraid of?
Hi, I'm Tim Wagner, Bram Stoker award-winning author.
Hashtag Grave Girls. This is Katrina Weidman of Destination America's Paranormal Lockdown.
This is Jim Chambers. I'm the author of The Engines of Sacrifice.
This is Jasper Barr, award-winning author of The Final Cut.
And you're listening to What Are You Afraid Of?
What Are You Afraid Of?
To What Are You Afraid Of?
What are you afraid of?
Love it. Fantoxic, please. Fantoxic.
An excerpt from Lake of Darkness by Scott Kenemore. The start of chapter 10, read by David Walton. The feeling stayed with him, the feeling that Ursula Green was animated by something larger and stronger than herself, something that existed outside her small, frail body, something that hid in the darkened rooms and waited alongside her, that the tentacles of a powerful leviathan extended up into her dress or shawl, or whatever the matted rags she wore had once been, and that only their slithering manipulations allowed her to speak and move and perform her magics. Something other, something beyond. Flip counted out another $1,000 and put it on the table. He lifted the crystal scrying ball, using it like a paperweight, and brusquely slid the green bills underneath. Then he exhaled in a single frustrated sigh. Ursula's marine animal laughter began almost immediately. "It's only been 3 days, she croaked. "A man with a divot in his head," Flip said. "Start talking." He looked back down to where he had placed his money. Money which he now saw had already vanished. Because of course it had. Ursula could not have had the strength to lift the ball, much less to do so deftly and silently. But something had. "Divot right here," Flip continued, pointing to his own pate. "He's Negro. He's middle-aged. He shops at fancy tailors, yeah?" "There are men like that all over this city," Ursula stated. "I suppose," Flip told her. "But perhaps there are not so many," Ursula said mysteriously. "1 is 2. 2 is 1. How many men can there be, really?" "You tell me," Flip said. "This is your racket, remember?" "Oh, Joe Flipperty, you have no idea," Ursula croaked distantly. "Don't start with that again," Flip said sternly. "I might have more of an idea than you think." The rocking chair moved slightly underneath Ursula. Her head lolled like an automaton losing power. "Why has this muddy, cold place beside Lake Michigan been the site of so much murder, Joe Flipperty? Why are there so many secrets here? Why so much blood? Why will there be so much blood 100 years from now, and 100 years hence, and 100 years after that, too?" Flip was silent. "Relax yourself," Ursula said. "You're not the only one who knows nothing." Flip opened his mouth to object, but thought better of it. "One man can be confused for another," Ursula continued. "The living can be confused with the dead. But what does it matter? All humbug, all mirror, all nonsense." Flip waited a moment longer. When Ursula did not continue, he said, "What have I confused, Ursula? The woman upstairs, the woman who runs this building where you live, she has twin babies. You don't start to be precise with me. Something could happen to them one day. This isn't street criminals killing each other. This involves a woman we both know, your damn landlord." Ursula's chair rocked once more. "This place, only for a moment is it a city, is part of a cycle of things. That is what you failed to understand. What has happened here has already happened and will happen again. The mayor who called for you, he is mayor now, and later he will be mayor again. This war in Europe, it will be now, and then later it will be again. The killer who takes these people, he kills now, and then later he will come again, and again, And all because you cannot see behind the mirror. You can see only your own face in it. But to another, it is a window. And he reaches through. He reaches through and searches for what has been taken. Flip's stark frustration mounted. "I have brought you the man's hat," Flip said loudly and deliberately. "It is stained with years of his sweat. Other times I've brung you something a man only touched once or twice, and your words have told me where to find him, and those times I paid you a whole lot less than I just did." Again, Ursula Green laughed like an ocean beast with something stuck in its blowhole. "Oh, it's got you now, Joe Flipperty," she cackled with amusement. "It's too late for you. You stuck in the jaws and don't even see it. You just squirming back and forth. And the pity of it? You ain't even what it's trying to eat. You're just the only one dumb enough to wander right into its mouth." Flip tried to be patient with the teetering old woman. They sat in silence for some time. Flip heard the ticking of his pocket watch. Occasionally, the cry of a reveller on the street outside could be heard. Flip looked up into the dark ceiling above them. It was unseeable and might go to infinity. "You don't even know what he did," Ursula eventually whispered. "Even that you have not puzzled." Flip's eyes flit over to the conjure woman, though he hated to look straight at her. He took a deep breath, summoning all his resolve. "All right," Flip said, staring straight into her face. "What did he do?" "This is different," Ursula said. "It searches for him. It searches for what was taken. You must see that. It is old, older than Chicago. I remember because I am older than Chicago. It is older than the Indians, even. It searches for what he took." Flip put his chin in his hand. "You're not going to shoot straight with me tonight, are you, Miss Green?" he said. "To the contrary, Joe Flipperty," she croaked. "This is the one night when I have said much more than I ought."
Mercy, a new horror medical thriller from author T. Fox Dunham, published by Bloodbound Books. Based on the author's horrific battle with a rare form of lymphoma that involved intense chemotherapy and radiation, Fox turns the horror of his experience into terror on the page.
William Saint is dying of cancer. On most days, death seems like a humane alternative to the treatment. Stricken with fever, William is rushed to Mercy, notorious as a place to send the sickest of the poor and uninsured to be forgotten, and finds the hospital in even worse condition than his previous visit.
Willie's memories faded. He grabbed his sack head of the scarecrow, picking at the exposed chicken wire to hold them in. However, the memories fell out of the holes in his face. They wormed and crawled from the leather flesh and the old clothing of the scarecrow, then squirmed and wiggled down his body.
The grounds are unkempt, the foundation is cracking, and like the wild mushrooms sprouting from the fissures of decay around it, something is growing inside the hospital. Something dark.
Fangoria gives Mercy 3.5 out of 4 skulls. Dunham has channeled his many brushes with the other side into the exquisitely rendered, lyrical, supernatural hospital thriller Mercy.
It's feeding on the sickness and sustaining itself on the staff, changing them, and now it wants Willie.
Come now, Mr. Saint. Just a little more of that sweet milk. So salty and so good. You won't miss it, and we ever do so like our delicacies here at Mercy Hospital.
Part medical horror, part supernatural suspense, Mercy is a hard-hitting fever dream of a novel. I enjoyed the hell out of it. Tim Wagner, author of The Way of All Flesh and Eat the Night. Available from Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and bookstores everywhere in both print and digital versions.
Life is an addiction.
Let go. Let it all burn.
Illuminating the paranormal. Opening your mind to the possibility. We'll talk about all things metaphysical, paranormal, and everything in between. Illuminating the Paranormal, Tuesday nights from 8 to 9 p.m. Eastern on Para X.
We're back. Episode 143. Scott Kenemore is bringing the zombies because a good pandemic needs zombies. That was David Walton. Thank you very much, David. He does such a beautiful job narrating our fiction, and the show wouldn't be the same without him. You know, he's got a...
He did a great job.
He's got a fan club, and, you know, he's just wonderful. And I know he's been not working the last few weeks from his library in Plymouth, so I've sent him like 25 files to record. And he's done a great job. But it's a wonderful book. Let me quote something from it, a bit of dialogue I really found interesting. And that was, "One man can be confused for another," Ursula continued. "The living can be confused with the dead. But what does it matter? All humbug, all mere, all nonsense." Scott, looking at your collection of published books, you've mostly written about zombies. However, Lake of Darkness is a crime thriller, noir, and cosmic horror, with historic fiction thrown in. So why did you decide to change your style?
I think wherever you, as a writer, at least for me, wherever you go, you're excited to tell the story of places you've lived or worked or seen sort of in your fiction. So I have my zombie trilogy, Zombie Ohio, Zombie Illinois, Zombie Indiana. And I've lived for at least 4 years in every one of those states. I've moved around the Midwest a lot. And for a lot of years, I knew that I wanted to tell a story about the South Side of Chicago because I worked there for many years, starting in 2004. You know, I think you said at the top of the show, I did work with organizations that sort of like fought the history of redlining. But in that line of work, you can't help but learn a lot about the history of buildings and apartment blocks and neighborhoods on the South Side and how they've changed over decades and decades. And it's just so interesting. And that part of the history of the city is just so interesting to me that I couldn't help but, want to set some kind of fictional story there, some kind of fictional world. And I also really got interested in the history of the Chicago Police Department because I think it's attractive when you have a police officer or detective sort of with some sort of handicap trying to solve a crime or in an absurd situation. And I think that was the case for a lot of African-American officers in Chicago, because like I sort of say this in the book, but if at first glance, Chicago can appear to have a very progressive history to the CPD. You know, they had black officers since right after the Civil War. They were a leader in hiring police matrons who are sort of like proto-female officers. Historians aren't sure, but they think the CPD hired the first black female police officer in the history of the United States in the early 1910s. So you say, oh, wow, really progressive, a leader. But you scratch that surface and you find out that, in the era I'm writing about, for example, like black officers didn't even get uniforms. It was just, here's a badge and a gun and keep things quiet in your part of town. And there were all these sort of like inflection points where gradually, black officers would get white partners or black officers would patrol in white neighborhoods and all these sort of like quiet sort of civil rights inflection points. So I thought that was such an interesting part of Chicago's history and an interesting time and place that I just don't see written about a lot. So I was really, really interested to sort of invoke that world in like a horror story.
I enjoy that. I enjoy that you're deriving into the history, using it to give more life to your setting, to your milieu, to your atmosphere, and drawing from that for the noir atmosphere of the book. And it all plays out very well.
I'm glad you thought so. If it gets just anybody interested in in Chicago's history, I feel like I did something good, or I had a success, because like this is not the long and the short of it. Like there's so much interesting stuff to learn about that I was not even able to begin to include in what I did. So it's a fascinating history, and so much just like vice and violence that predates Capone, that I think so many people assume Capone was everything, but like, I mean, there were so many interesting things going on before he even came to town.
Yeah, and Frank Sinatra has that song "Chicago," right? Where the mob bosses, they were actually after him, not for writing the song, but for the whole Jack Kennedy debacle. That's another story.
Yeah.
So Publishers Weekly called Lake of Darkness a superb blend of noir and horror. Kenemore keeps the tension high throughout. Fans of gritty urban fantasy will want to read more from this gifted writer. So what and where inspired you to write and world build Lake of Darkness?
Well, so I think I've talked about I was interested in how the South Side had changed because I worked there so much, and interested in the Chicago Police Department's history and what it would be like for, a black cop in 1915 or so to have to solve a crime amidst so much absurdity. And I was also really interested in the politics of Chicago back then. And, if you've read the book, Big Bill Thompson is a major character, and he's another sort of like really interesting, important Chicago figure who I think is largely forgotten. He served non-consecutive terms. He was the mayor during World War I, and then the mayor again during the Capone years. And he sort of, for me, is sort of straddles both worlds of being like, he had one foot in the sort of like just total like wide open city, Al Swearingen, Wild West, lawless Chicago, and then one foot in the very like contemporary Chicago of understanding we have to attract businesses. We have to give Chicago a national reputation as a place where contracts are enforced and there's law and order. And he also was a master at learning to play different groups against each other politically to ensure that he would remain in power for as long as he did, which was, I think, not sort of a Wild West thing. But he was really a pioneer at it from what I'm able to tell.
Excellent. I was just in Chicago 2 years ago, and I got a chance to go visit. We saw a Cubs game. It was very cool at Wrigley Field, and I got a chance to visit the Chicago History Museum, which I enjoyed quite a bit. And of course, we all have our good friend there, Big Tony Riviera, editor at Gray Matter Press. They're doing some great things at Gray Matter Press. To quote your wonderful prose in Lake of Darkness, again, Ursula Green laughed like an ocean beast with something stuck in its blowhole. I'm assuming you mean like a whale blowhole or a dolphin blowhole or something like that. Yeah. So reading Lake of Darkness, I detected a quirky style to your prose, humorous at times. So why do you go with this quirky style, and how has humor played a role in your books?
That's a great question. I think it just comes down to my personality. I think it's so challenging as a writer to know, how should I say this, to know how to design the world and the storytelling style that's going to please your audience. And I think writers might think about things like, do I need to be scarier? Do I need to be more serious? Do I need to be less serious? And it's easy to overthink those sort of things. So having been doing this a while now, what I always tend to come back to when I'm faced with a decision of how do I set a scene, or how harrowing do I make something, or do I raise the tension or lighten the tension, I always think, well, at least I know what I like. And it's a very sort of like, philosophy 101 idea of like, well, I know what I experience. I know that is true. Very sort of like early Rene Descartes. But I feel like I know what I think is scary, and I know what I think is funny. And folks have definitely commented previously on, I'll sort of have a lot of puns, maybe even bad puns or silly puns in my writing. And I do a lot of horror that is also humorous. And I think that's just because that's how my brain works and what my brain likes. And when I'm wondering what kind of flavor or tone to set in a scene, I tend to think, well, I think this is funny, damn it. I think this is amusing. And if this is making me smile, then I know I'm pleasing one reader. So I tend to go with just the inner quirkiness that I personally enjoy.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. I like to infuse a lot of humor into my writing too, but also, do you go back and forth with your writing? Do you write serious and then switch automatically to quirky?
Oh, sure. I think I'd like to learn to do that better. I think it's important to raise and lower tension and to learn how that works. And I'm definitely still getting my sea legs and trying to learn to do it correctly. Do you have tips on what you think about and what works for you?
Well, when I'm writing something specific, like I wrote a book called Worst Afterlife Ever, which I'm editing now, and it's very quirky, it has a lot of humor, but there's also very serious themes behind it. So I just take the serious themes and I try not to humorize them too much because it's and then right after that I break the tension with some humor. But then there's also times where I'll write a short story and it's completely serious. There's no humor in it whatsoever, and it's a little tough to go back and forth. But once you're in that mindset, I think you can do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Sure. So when I'm writing, I do a lot of ghostwriting on the side and stuff. But when I'm doing like my own creative writing, I start with an idea, and sometimes I'll outline stuff and sort of take notes. Not really like outlining. I don't really outline plots, but I will sort of take notes on themes and characters and begin to think about, is this enough for a book? Is this something I could do? And then when it comes to actual writing, this book took me longer than most. I can usually write a book in a year. And it seems that among writers, there's vast disagreement on the appropriateness of that. Because I'll talk to my like Manhattan literary writer friends, and they'll be like, a book every year? Like, it's not a race, Scott. Like, does something be good if you only spend a year on it? And then I'll talk to genre writer friends at like the Horror Writers Association meeting or something. And these are people who write like 2, 3, sometimes 4 books a year. And they're like, well, if one is the best you can do, don't feel bad about yourself. And your green vegetables, do your homework, you'll be there one day. But in terms of the actual process, so I have a day job in corporate communications, and I take the Chicago CTA subway train to work every morning. So at least half of my over half, 51% at least of the writing I actually do is during my commute with my laptop on a subway seat going into downtown Chicago every morning.
That's great that you can do that, because that you can actually just block out everything around you and concentrate on what you need to do. Well, that's wonderful.
I think it's different for every writer, and it's something I had to learn about myself. Like I remember when I was an MFA student in New York City, I would think, well, I need to be in an inspiring environment to write something good. So I would literally walk from my apartment in Morningside Heights to the river and sit in the park. And I had like a fancy ballpoint pen someone had once given me, and I would sit there with my fancy pen and look at the sunset and the river and think, this is what, and looking back, like that was just asinine. And it's a wonder I wasn't mugged and my pen stolen, totally. But at the time I thought, well, maybe this is what I need to, but now I find it's just, I'm able to turn it on, for an hour every morning while the train takes me into town. So I don't know if that's luck or the wisdom of age or just practice.
You know what, though, Scott, don't walk around with toilet paper, because that will definitely get stolen.
That's these days, yeah.
I was going to say, because working with a laptop on a subway is so much safer, from being mugged than, in Central Park with a pen. Now, looking back, this is a question we often ask every author that's been on here, especially the rather successful ones like you have been. Looking back when you first started writing, and knowing what you know now about the industry and your work, what do you wish you knew when you started that you know now?
Man, just that you can't please everybody. And I would say trust your own sense of the feeling you're kind of trying to conjure. So whatever genre you write in, trust what you think is scary, or you think is funny, or you think is romantic, or you think is exciting, because I think you can be, when you're starting out, you can be paralyzed by wondering if what you're doing will appeal to other people, because they might not have the same tastes as you, or sense of whatever you're trying to conjure or create. And I just wish I'd had a lot more faith in myself, because at the end of the day, I think when you try to be too much of a prostitute and to please other people in a way that doesn't please you, it's sort of obvious that your heart's not in it, and they can sense that, and the end product is just not so good. But for me, when I sit down to write, I think, God, what would I find just like so scary, or like, oh, what would be like so funny if it happened next? Those are the things that reliably an editor or an agent will say, like, oh, like that's actually good. I like that part. But when I try to just be a mercenary, I tend to not produce very good stuff. And I think I'm not the only person who finds that. So that would be my advice.
Okay, so Scott Kenemore, writing this down, says not to be too much of a prostitute. I'm not quite sure.
A little bit of a prostitute.
I guess I'll charge a little less or something like that. Okay, speaking of prostitutes, can you recite us one of your ribald limericks?
So you asked me about this. So in my About Me page, because all writers have that About Me page on their website, and what do you choose to brag about, right? And so I include the fact that I have published some limericks and some fun, including like a book published by HarperCollins. And so I don't have a new limerick for you today, sadly, as I've not had time to compose them. But the one I'm probably proudest of was featured by the Chicago Sun-Times in a limerick contest that they held. And is shortly will be clear. The reason they held this was a local businessman named Sam Zell was threatening to buy and change the name of Wrigley Field, the beloved Chicago baseball stadium. So they said, well, we're going to have a Sam Zell themed limerick contest. Now this is not, high entertainment. This is Sun-Times noticing that Zell rhymes with hell, and that they're going to get 50,000 submissions of Sam Zell can go to hell. So I said, well, I want to enter this contest, but how can I insult Sam Zell without resulting to the H double hockey sticks word? So my limerick, which if I recall it right, I will recite for you, was there once was a town called Chicago that truly had found its Iago. He said, I may have millions, but my tastes are vaudevillian, so to Wrigley shall my withered claw go. And that was one of the winners, according to the Sun-Times. And I'm like, I'm not proud of that. That makes me smile when I think of all the things I've written.
Nice pretentious use of Shakespeare, so I'm good with that. I love that. So anyway,
Chicago's a hard rhyme, I gotta tell you.
That was excellent. I've never Barry, you're quite right about the rhyme. But we are What Are You Afraid of? Horror and Paranormal Show, talking limericks with zombie author Scott Kenemore and author of The New Lake of Darkness, which was out on May 5th. I'm sure this will probably play in June. But go over to our website at www.whatayouafraidofpodcast.com, where you'll find a page on Scott, this episode, plus links where you can find his book, or go over to Lake of Darkness and make sure to leave a review. That is so important. Not enough people who appreciate the book leave the reviews, and authors really need that today. But we'll be right back with some ghost stories from Scott on What Are You Afraid of? Horror and Paranormal Show, episode 143. Scott Kenemore is bringing the zombies.
Red, where are you going?
I'm going back to the Paranormal View, back where I belong.
Please, take me with you.
No, I'm through with everything here. I want to see if there's something left in life I haven't explored. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Oh, Red, don't run to them. They talk about ghosts and hauntings, UFOs, and all kind of supernatural scary stuff.
You'll never understand, will you, Scarlet?
No!
Well, that's your misfortune.
Red, if you go, where shall I go? What shall I do?
Frankly, my dear... Line!
Oh, you gotta be kidding.
That's the Paranormal View with your host, Henry Foister, Jeffrey Gould, and Barbara Duncan. Every Saturday night at 8 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on the Para X Radio Network.
Finally, winter's icy and dead hand releases from our heart. It's summer. A time for cookouts, swimming, fishing, kayaking, campfire ghost stories, and zombies. Oh, see how they frolic in the parks and fields, eating squirrels and deer, shambling about in fun, riding away in the summer heat. That decomposing smell of roadkill in the oven is the fun smell of undead zombie fun. Fun composing. Now see how they join your barbecue. Eating picnickers. What fun. Lemonade and spleens. No, stop. Instead of bombing them, that's all summer dance. Fun composing. Okay, I guess that didn't work. Back to the bombing. Fun composing. Fun composing.
Fun composing.
We're back. What are you afraid of? But Scott's been a lot of fun to talk to, and he's had a lot of great energy, and he's an excellent speaker. He knows how to wrap things up, and you can definitely tell that he's a communication expert, and I love his work, and I'll be reading more of it, plus the zombie stuff this Halloween, I'm sure. So, Scott, well, we always play a ghost story on the show, but we heard that you have some ghost stories, so tell us about some of your experiences with the paranormal.
Okay, so I have two. And they're I hope this is okay. They're both secondhand, but are from very trusted sources. I myself, I've never seen a ghost. I was racking my brain in preparation for that. There have been periods where like a window was open or something seemed to have moved in a house, but I can't say for sure that like, someone just didn't open the window when I wasn't looking or move the thing. So I don't think those are good, but the two I have are excellent. So the first comes from a college friend of mine, and I got his permission to tell this story on the show. But his grandfather was a medic in Italy in World War II when the Allies were sort of pushing the Nazis and the fascists up out of the
Sicily, Anzio kind of thing.
Right, exactly.
Monte Cassino, yeah.
Exactly. So it is evening after a day of fighting, and they've sort of dug trenches to try to bed down for the night, but they're still being shelled a little bit. And he gets a call on his radio that says, like, hey, we need you to come back to the medical tent. Johnson's hurt. So he says, okay. So he gets up out of his foxhole, runs a jagged line back to the medical tent, and he says, hey, I'm here. What's up with Johnson? And they said, like, what are you talking about? Like, we didn't call for you. Johnson died yesterday. And he's like, oh, because you just called me. Someone just called me. And they're like, nope, what are you talking about? That wasn't us. So he's sort of confused, goes back to his foxhole to discover that while he was gone, the foxhole had sustained a direct hit from an enemy shell. So he would have been killed. And his whole life just wondered what had happened. I got this call saying Johnson is asking for me. Johnson is already dead, and it saves my life.
Oh,
so
wow.
That's story number one.
Okay.
The ghost military shell. So story number two is about my in-laws, my mother-in-law, my father-in-law. So they live in a town outside of Chicago called Geneva, Illinois, in a very old house that, is my understanding, was a Civil War hospital at one point. Was a place where it obviously wasn't at the front, but they would bring back injured people. And apparently, this house has a long history. People have written about it, and there supposedly is a ghost that lives there, and it's the ghost of this particular woman who I believe had some sort of nursing capacity in the hospital. But one of the ways the ghost will manifest is that it will unscrew light bulbs, and you'll be talking to someone, and then suddenly a light bulb will just fall out of its socket, break on the floor, right?
Yeah.
But what is interesting to me, though, is that after the house was built, a train line, there's the Metro train, which goes into downtown Chicago, was also built. So the thinking is maybe every time the train goes by, it vibrates the house, and a light bulb unscrews just a little bit, and then over weeks and weeks and weeks, it will unscrew a light bulb and it will fall. So maybe that is the real reason for the manifestation of the ghost.
That could be the explanation. That is a very logical explanation, but yeah, I mean, it depends on how tightly the light bulb is screwed in, though, I guess.
Oh yeah. And also, Civil War hospital, I'd be wondering too. I'd be like, that sounds like a real scary type of setting.
The genus loci, the spirit of the place, is sad and mournful, and of course places remember. And of course Phil and I love our Civil War stuff. We love getting up to Gettysburg every year. Hopefully we'll be back in July if they can go I doubt they're doing the paranormal convention this year, but hopefully you and I will get back at least this summer and enjoy some Gettysburg before the winter pulls in. Well, this has been a great interview. I really enjoyed this one.
Well, me too.
Thank you for having me on, you guys. This was really fun.
I really loved talking to you. It was great.
Absolutely. And this is episode 143. What Are You Afraid Of? Scott Kenemore is bringing the zombies. He really did bring the zombies to this episode.
He did bring the zombies. There's one outside my window right now.
I'm going to be doing zombie stuff, for the next couple of months now after this, and maybe go back and read some of the books. And we actually have Daniel Krauss wants to come on the show. Their media agent's been in touch. And of course, Grady Hendrix is locking down the date with us now. Hopefully we'll be recording with him June 3rd. But we've got some great horror authors coming on this summer, and hopefully I'll find some more paranormal guests to bring on too as we move into our Halloween extravaganza that we do. But this was a great episode. Thank you so much for coming on, Scott.
Thank you for having me. This was great.
Thank you so much, Scott.
Well, we'll be back with episode 144 in about 2 weeks after this, and hopefully by then we'll at least be moving out into the world cautiously. No need to put someone else's life in danger, because you want to go out and get a hot dog, so be cautious. But this is T. Fox Dunham.
And this is Phil Thomas.
Fashionable, and let me, put on tailored clothing and come to my castle, and we'll have red wine. And zombies are just sort of like, I'm up out of the ground and I'm going to eat your brain. And we're not fancy. We're just very casual kind of horror.
T. Fox Dunham lives in Philadelphia with his wife Allison. He's a lymphoma survivor, cancer patient, modern bard and historian. His first book, The Street Martyr, was published by Gutter Books. A television series based on the book is being produced by Throughline Films. Destroying the Tangible Illusion of Reality or Searching for Andy Kaufman, a book about what it's like to be dying of cancer, was released from Perpetual Motion Machine Publishing, and Fox has a story in the Stargate anthology Points of Origin from MGM and Fandemonium Books. Fox is an active member of the Horror Writers Association, and he's had published hundreds of short stories and articles. His motto is Wrecking Civilization, one story at a time. Find out more information at www.tfoxdunham.com.
Phil Thomas is an author and screenwriter from the suburbs of Philadelphia. His screenplays have been produced into 2 feature films, False Face and Always from Darkness, and are available in major retailers such as Best Buy and Target, as well as availability on Netflix and Amazon Prime on demand. His screenplay, 3 Tunnels, was a semi-finalist at the LA Screenplay Competition. He is a member of the International Association of Professional Writers and Editors, and he currently writes for Cultured Vultures, Game Skinny, and BloodyDisgusting.com. He formerly held the position of Senior Marketing Manager at Eternal Press, and was a journalist for Patch, where he wrote a daily tech column covering the latest electronics and gadgets. He lives in the suburbs of Philadelphia, and is currently working on his second novel, Worst Afterlife Ever.
The views expressed and the opinions given by the individual host and their guests do not necessarily reflect those of Para X, its affiliates, or its sponsors.